I was going to mention something too along the line of communicating this information to people, because that's really our task at Child Protection League, is to expose, as you said, and inform. And we try to find different ways to do that. And really, we rely on everybody that we are associated with. You know, we try to equip people to do that. And we try to equip legislators with information that they otherwise, you know, sometimes don't have at their fingertips. And so when we try to communicate these values, these ideas, what's going on, the movements that behind all these laws that are being passed, we, you know, it's always couched in really nice sounding words. So you get words like safe schools, bodily autonomy, equality, fairness, empowering, sustainability, even civics. They all sound wonderful, and my mode of operation is like, the better it sounds, the worse it is. So you really have to lift the veil off the meaning of these things, and that's what we have to become very smart about, that, because we're vulnerable to the language that they deliberately misuse. One of the things we find is that what Kimberly was talking about was all kinds of what you might call social issues, and they sound like they're just like on another. They try to separate the social issues from the political issues, and of course, all those social issues are political issues. So you get social issues like redefining marriage, abortion, multiple genders, comprehensive sex ed, equity and critical race theory, transformational education, social and emotional learning, sexual rights for kids. All of them can be lumped into social issues, and a lot of people in the political realm don't want to touch them because they're social issues. They're all political issues. And what is the common thing for all those things? They're not individual issues. They're the same. They all have a foundation that is exactly the same. It's revolution. It's war on our country. That's why there's a war on children, instead of a war on our country. And it's about global governance. So you really talked about what this is, you know, at the UN. Well, you can go to DC, you can go to the state legislature, you can go to your local school board, you can go to your local city councils, and it's all the way through. But it's the same agenda, and so we have to stop thinking about it as individual whack-a-moles. We're going to go after this and after that and after this. It's the same underlying ideology, the same underlying ideology. So, with that in mind, I'll just talk a little bit about where we are. You should all have a copy, I think, of the legislative update from Child Protection League. Is that right? Or don't you? You have it? Are there enough to make sure that everybody has them? So you don't have to have them as I read, but you'll want it as a resource. So, then you can take that with you. Let's see now. This is nice. Oh, here we go. I just wanted to start out by saying something about critical race theory in the legislature, because Catherine talked about the standards, but I want you to know that it's being, and there are attempts to embed it in state law, apart even from the standards. And so it would actually drive the standards to do what they are trying to do already. So HF 1065 is the House Education Policy and Finance Omnibus bill, and in it they have ethnic studies. They're setting up a whole statute that requires there to be what's called ethnic studies. So ethnic studies is basically critical race theory and equity. And from the proposed language, the commissioner must appropriately embed ethnic studies into all required state academic standards during the review and revision of the standards. And that's just a book there, Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, who is kind of a key leftist education radical that is kind of basic training in education today. And it's all about critical race theory is fundamental to education. And this is more quote from HF 1065. Ethnic studies analyzes the ways in which race and racism have been and continue to be powerful social, cultural, and political forces, and race and racism's connections to the stratification of other groups, including stratification based on gender, class, sexual orientation, gender identity, and legal status. So you see, they also see it as the same agenda. The sexual orientations, the gender identity, the women's, the feminist perspective of the world, that's all part of the same thing. This was passed by the House just last week or the week before, with it in it, and then there's a counter balance in the Senate. They have an omnibus bill also, and that just was passed a few days ago, has none of this in it. So the two bills are quite different from each other. And so all of this will be hashed out in a conference committee. That's the way, I mean, many of you know, some of you maybe don't know, but you have to have the same bill that goes to the governor to either sign or veto, and so they have to work out the differences. So both of those bills have been passed, and it remains in the hands of the conference committee, which are appointed legislators, 5, 6, or 7 of them from the House and staying from the Senate. So there's a balance there. Ethnic studies curriculum may be integrated in existing curricular opportunities or provided through additional curricular offerings. So they're telling them, you can put it into all of the curriculum. And here's the Department of Education duties of ethnic studies staff, making available to school districts and charter schools the following. The number of things, a school survey for each school district and charter school to use as a part of a school needs assessment. Some of you have some experience with those surveys. They're deadly. They walk you down a path of the children, they're showing the children basically that they are white supremacists from the get-go. And then it provides the ammunition for them to do more of the curriculum. They provide a list of recommended materials, resources, the sample curriculum, and pedagogical skills for a kindergarten through grade 12 that accurately reflect the diversity of the state of Minnesota, training materials, and again, it includes their school needs assessment. I mean, they have this whole system all set up. Now, instead of just working through the state standards, social studies standards, they want to include it into state law. Anti-racist, so then they define anti-racist in state law. They're defining these terms, means the active process of identifying and eliminating racism by changing systems, organizational structures, policies, practices, attitudes, and dispositions, so that power and resources are redistributed and shared equitably. That's a good description of Marxist ideology. Institutional racism means policies and practices within and across institutions that produce outcomes that chronically favor white people and predictably disadvantage those who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Translation, all disparities are caused by racism. And of course, the achievement gap in Minnesota is horrific. That's the outcomes that compared from the minorities to the white population. And so they claim, and very aggressively so, that there is an achievement gap because of racism. it's embedded racism. And if there wasn't racism, then why is there an achievement gap? You know, it's evidence to them that there's racism. And of course, the problem isn't racism, the problem is the family. And it's been demonstrated, you know, and there's study after study that has demonstrated the outcomes for all areas, not just in education, but in success in life, is best reflected by an intact family, two-parent family. And they will never go there. They will never go there. And the reason is because if securing the family is the answer to the achievement gap, then you have to stop doing what you're doing in the schools, which is teaching comprehensive sex ed, you know, that breaks down the family. And it's exactly, they're teaching them the kind of lifestyle that will not build families. And I'll just mention as well, that they deliberately know that sexually active young people are ripe for being revolutionaries. I mean, they state that, they know that. And as we're seeing revolutionary in the streets. And one more is school districts must use local data to the extent practical to develop plan components and strategies, plans that include professional development opportunities for teachers and administrators, including knowledge, skills, and dispositions needed to be anti-racist and culturally sustaining. So, I mean, it's transformational education. It's all about changing the student. Okay, so the first bill that I'm going to talk about is, these won't be in order, the same order as on your sheet, but this one is, just a minute here. I didn't turn the pages. Okay. HF 229 is the sentencing guidelines, and I have to say that child pornography images frequently, this is about sentencing guidelines for child pornography, what we call child abuse imagery. This is a quote from the Minnesota State Guidelines Commission. Child pornography images frequently depict children, toddlers, and infants being sexually assaulted, physically abused, tortured, and humiliated. So we're not talking about, you know, something small. This is huge. And when they go after these, these individuals, what we find is that it's not just the people that have a few pictures and videos, but they have hundreds and thousands, or as the Sentencing Guidelines Commission described it, they have large collections of images of such young children. So most of these abused children are younger than 12 years old, and let's see. I went the wrong way. Let's see. Okay, in Minnesota, about 85% of persons convicted of trafficking in this material receive only probation, no prison time, no identification as a sexual predator, and no record of criminal offense. So, Representative Matt Grossel will be able to say more about this when we get him up here to speak about that, because he's been the driver behind some of these things. Minnesota is the worst in the nation for sentencing convicts of this kind. We're not taking it seriously. Essentially, we're decriminalizing trading in the torture of children. That's not understating it. Let's see. HF 229 and 226 mirror federal penalties for production, distribution, receipt, and possession of child sexual abuse imagery, register as predatory offenders, and making their criminal history accessible to the public. So that is, okay, where does that stand? Right now, there has been, neither of those bills has got a hearing in either the House or the Senate. And there has been something that was done along the lines, which is not adequate at all, that got into the Senate Omnibus bill for the judiciary. So there is something being done, and again, I'm going to refer to Representative Grossel to say more about that when he comes up here. So the next one is the CSE, which is a Comprehensive Sexuality and Health Education Bill. Okay, I just want to tell you a little bit about the background of this. So we probably are pretty familiar with this. It's the right of young people to be sexually active, how to consent to sex, multiple gender ideology, sex ed for social change, Planned Parenthood, and gender activism in the classroom. That is what this is. I just want to tell you a quick history. In April 23rd of 2019, it was included in the Omnibus education bill. And there was an amendment put forward by Representative Peggy Bennett from Albert Lee to delete that mandate. So this is a mandate for every school to teach this. And it was mostly along party lines after hours of intense debate. And Representative Lucero, who is here today too, he took to the floor and exposed what this curriculum actually looks like. He lifted the veil, like we said, you know, it's not what it sounds like, it's what it actually is. And he read from It's Perfectly Normal, which is one of the major books out there on comprehensive sex ed. And the debate just went on for hours, and we knew that we didn't have the votes to win, but what it did is it made it so controversial, which was the whole idea, make it so controversial that no Republican in the Senate dared touch it. And I mean, otherwise, if they don't know how toxic this is, you know, they just get swept along. And they think, well, that sounds pretty good. I'm not so much against that. I've got constituents who think this is a good idea. So they didn't touch it, didn't go anywhere that year. So what we did is, from then on, we blanketed the state with this. There are some of them back there. And it stopped CSE. You know, this went, you know, tens of thousands of these around the state. And we spoke all around the state, and people knew nothing about it. And now people are finding out about it. So it's become very controversial. So what happened this year? Well, this year, they introduced the same bill, different number, and they went through 3 different committees, all party line votes, and they, you know, the Democrats control it in the House, so they can do whatever they want. Guess what? They didn't put it in the education omnibus bill. It's not in there. It's not in there this year. Why? Well, it was a political issue in 2020, for one thing. It was a political issue. They didn't want to go through all that again. It's a very bad PR hit. And parents do not want this. They claim that they do, and they don't. This is something from It's Perfectly Normal. Some of you, many of you maybe have seen this, but this is the way this is like, Planned Parenthood is the one behind most of this. And this is what they recommend as good curriculum for 10-year-olds. As you can see, caution, 10-year-olds. So you can see that sexual intercourse can involve the penis and the vagina, or the mouth and the genitals and the penis and the anus. I'm sorry to have to read that to you, but I'm afraid you can't see it so well. Is this appropriate for 10-year-olds to see? We blurred it out. They don't. Nothing is blurred out. It's all, I'll make it. So Jacob Williams is an internationally recognized for his work to stop sex trafficking, and we gave him a copy of It's Perfectly Normal. He took one look at it, and he said, comprehensive sex ed in the public schools does the grooming for pimps and predators. Grooming is removing a child's natural barriers to sexual encounters by exposure to sexual images, language, and experiences. So that's where we are with that. That's a huge victory. Okay, I want to go back to this for just a second. Wait a second. Wait, let's see. I want to go this way. There, okay. Why is this important? Okay, here's the deal. People, you know, if you talk to some of the legislators, they'll say, this isn't going anywhere. So don't worry, just don't worry. This is a key element of the strategy of the left to take over America. I want you to know, this is not something that's going away. This is a very, very important part of their strategy, to sexualize the children. And if you hear any of our presentations, we'll give you all the background on it. I mean, this is part of the plan. They've made it very explicit. So it is not going away. It is a primary agenda for the left. And so we squeak by this year, you know, I mean, and then maybe, you know, it's coming, and people need to know. They have to know what the agenda is. They have to know. I mean, and if the ethnic studies doesn't pass because the Republicans keep it out of conference committee, people need to know about the ethnic studies because it is a major part of the agenda to take over our country. And if we're sitting there saying, oh, well, it didn't make it through, you know, we've got work to do, other stuff to think of. No, this is bottom line. People need to know. We are going to continue to tell people what this is. And just because we've dodged the bullet in this session doesn't mean that it's not going to be there the next time around. Because when they passed in the House the first time, nobody knew. They didn't know that it was happening. They didn't know what it was. They didn't know that it was even on the horizon. So that's why it's important. Okay, the next one is remove school exemption to the Minnesota obscenity statute. And that one hasn't seen a light of day in committees of either house either. The current law says it is in the best interest of the health, welfare, and safety of minors that dissemination of sexually explicit written, photographic, printed, sound, or published material are deemed harmful to minors. Don't you think that that would apply to this stuff? Yeah. Well, current law also exempts K-12 schools from the law. So they're not subject to the obscenity statutes. I want to see. Okay. Just wanted to see how far I have to go. So, where are we with this one? So this one, we haven't, like, right. Okay, that one, this one should be kind of a no-brainer, right? So what we did is we sent a letter to, you know, a number of different legislators asking them to not only sign on, and there are quite a few that have signed on, but asking them to really try to get a hearing, you know, and encourage their colleagues to have a hearing in the committees so that it can at least get into, you know, the Senate omnibus bill. It won't be this year because that's too far down the road, but we still have a second year next year for the second part of the biennium, and so we're really pushing that one. This is basically a proactive approach to, you know, being opposed to comprehensive sex ed, because this would really hit comprehensive sex ed very hard. Okay. So this one, student access to online porn in school databases. Maybe you don't know, but proprietary databases, in particular, includes an e-library in Minnesota. They have those databases, and the schools have them. Almost all schools have access to a couple of those databases that have porn right on them. And it bypasses the school filters because it's proprietary information. And people really do not really know that. Legislators don't really know that. So that's one of the things we're trying to get out to people. This is a national effort, and many states are dealing with these issues. And because there are a couple of them in particular, EBSCO and GALE, it doesn't matter what the acronym means, but they link to porn and obscenity on their platforms. And on our Child Protection League Action YouTube, we have some really good presentations on just walking you through it. Okay, go here, go to the children's section over here, and here. Now click on this and put in this search word and just see what comes up. Let's just see what comes up, and it'll just take you right through it. There has been some improvement in them. They have the databases have to be filtered by the owners of the company, and they have done some improvement, but it is just spotty, and you never know what they're going to put back in. So the law here would require that online research database services block access to porn and other obscene materials. and that ELM, that's the e-library Minnesota, is available online, yeah, so that it's their responsibility to figure out how to, it would be illegal to do that. And that wasn't heard in either the House or the Senate either. However, Representative Lucero amended it into the House Education Omnibus bill, and it passed. I think thank you, Representative Lucero. And it was a surprise to me, it was a surprise to him, but they didn't really want to be on record voting against it. And so the problem is that it's not in the Senate Omnibus bill. So, it still has to go through that if it's going to continue on. And the next one is a constitutional amendment for education. I don't think this is on your list, but this is a constitutional right for all children to quality education. Doesn't that sound good? I tell you, they know how to use the language. And so who's not for that, right? So a lot of Republicans sign on to that, but basically what it does is it says all children. Now, all children is all children. I mean, they claim that it's just for the public schools, down at the bottom, and sure public schools, but all children, they have a constitutional right to quality public education as defined by the standards that the state puts together, and it's a paramount duty of the state. Okay, what's wrong with that? It transfers authority over education from the legislature to the state, contrary to a republic which authorizes only the legislature to pass laws. Who caught that? And that's one of the problems of it. The other problem is, so why can't they apply this to non-public schools and children? Why can't they? It says all children have a constitutional right. They claim, no. It specifically says quality public schools, so it doesn't apply to them. I think the jury's out on that, frankly. And so the whole, I think it was the Homeschool Legal Defense Association took a real strong stand against this because they said it will. And so there was a real argument over that. And so that remains to be seen. But the point of the matter is that the state, it becomes, the determination of quality education is totally in the hands of the bureaucracy and in the hands of the judiciary. So it's basically, they're gonna file a lawsuit against the schools to say, my kid isn't getting a quality education, therefore it's gonna go to the courts, and the courts are gonna just give them a lot more money, so the state has to give them a lot more money. It's just a way around it. And here's the thing about this, so incredibly offensive. They're pushing this as if what we have now is a racist system. Again, because the outcomes are bad for minority students. Therefore, it's a racist system. And they said, our Constitution was written back in, 1857? At that time, slavery was legal. So this is all intended for blacks and minorities, to get a second-rate education. So does that make sense? I mean, in fact, our Constitution, when it was founded, was specifically against slavery. It's right in the Constitution. It says absolutely not. And yes, in some states, at that time, it was legal. But the logic of this is just outrageous because many people will have this, guilt put on them about race, and so they support things like this. Just because if it's racist, well, we're going to change that, and we're going to say everybody should have quality education. It's a sleight of hand. The other part about it is there's nothing in there that says what's going to change. I mean, so it's suddenly you demand this quality education, but you don't say what you're going to change. So why are you supposed to assume that it will change? What is going to change exactly? There's no plan for that. So I mean, it's a fake constitutional amendment, but doesn't it sound good? And next one here. Okay, this one is on your sheet. It's oh no, that's the next one. I already said that, okay. Yeah, there's where I said I'm going, let's see, how do I go to you guys get a chance to see some of these things. Oh, I know. There we go. Okay. This is prohibits male students from participating in female-only sports, and this is Representative Lucero's bill. It defines male as the person with one X and one Y chromosome. Male students in Minnesota public schools and in post-secondary schools may not try out for or participate on a female-only team. Communal restrooms, locker rooms, dressing rooms are off limits for males defined that way. And I wanted to show you, we put this out in October 2014. This was a full-page ad in the Sunday, full-color ad in the Sunday Star Tribune, and it says, a male wants to shower beside your 14-year-old daughter. Are you okay with that? That was when the Minnesota State High School League, right after the anti-bullying bill passed, which we called the bullying bill, because all it was a way to bring in LGBT to the school, into the school classrooms all over the state. We call it anti-bullying by doing that. So we call it the bullying bill. And as soon as that passed, right away, the Minnesota State High School League says, yep, you gotta let the males, in the sports teams. And so we really had a campaign against that. So I just wanted to tell you, 2014, we were ahead of the curve, okay? This is what it was. A male wants to shower. And it caused such a furor around the country. I mean, we were really ahead of what's happening now. I mean, Michelle, how many interviews did you do that at that time?
42 requests and 39 I got.
39 interviews from around the country about what? How can you say that? Governor Dayton at that time, he publicly went after us. He said, this is just awful that you would say anything like that. Here we are. This is another one that we did. Newspapers across the state, we had all different, weekly newspapers. We put this full page ad in. The end of girls' sports. Well, that's what we're looking at, right? So here's our press release. MSHSL transgender proposal, unfair and unsafe to all students. And that was, we had a press release, we had a press conference, we did the whole thing. So then what actually happened is there were a couple of other bills that were submitted that are similar. HF 1657, okay, that one isn't up here, okay. There was something that actually ended up in the Senate education bill. It was Senator Rude's amendment that said that it defines, I don't have that. Okay, so it basically says that men can't be in, male can't participate in female sports, but it doesn't define what male and female is. And so, where are you when those definitions, don't mean much? And I'll leave Representative Lucero an opportunity to talk a little bit more about that. So this also is on your list as the Equal Rights Constitutional Amendments, and there are several of them. And they also were put in 2019. Only in 2019, they called them the Equal Rights Amendment. And so what we did is we blew the whistle on that, because it wasn't an Equal Rights Amendment for women, which is what everybody thinks it is. It is a Equal Rights Amendment for genders. So this basically is doing exactly what Kimberly was saying. It's just across the board taking off the definitions of male and female. And there are several of those. Some of them say equality under the law shall not be abridged or denied on account of sex, and others say on account of gender. But both of them, the short definition of the bill is equality of rights for gender. So everybody understands that you can't say sex means chromosomes. It just means whatever you want it to mean. And so that none of those are in the Senate in the Senate bills either. So they probably won't go anywhere this year. But it's one of those things that they're trying to do, that they'll continue to try to do. Okay, I think that was it. So that's kind of where we are. And what we try to do is give to legislators some of the background story, the backstories for some of these things. And it helps because they don't get that from their research staff, which I don't understand. But that's what we do, and it does make a difference because they can vote informed instead of not knowing what these words mean. So I think that's it for me.